The CEO burst into our incident room like a man running from a fire, red-faced, jacket still on, and he shouted, "Fix it tonight!" as if volume could reboot a system. The monitors behind me were a wall of pain. Customer errors climbing, database latency spiking, support tickets multiplying. "Nothing loads. We can't bill. We're dead in the water." He stabbed a finger at the graphs. "I don't care what you have to do," he said. "Roll back. Restart. Call whoever. I want this gone before morning." I nodded, calm on the outside, because that's what you do when the person who signs your paycheck is panicking. But inside, something colder settled in, because I already knew this failure had a fingerprint, and it wasn't ours. I'm a senior reliability engineer at a fast-growing software company. The kind that says family in all hands, and then measures love in uptime. I don't do drama. I keep systems boring. Boring is profitable. That night, boring was dead. I'd taken this job because I believed in the mission, and honestly, because the CEO could sell ice to a furnace. He'd hired smart people, listened early on, and paid for good infrastructure even when it hurt. I defended him in chats when others called him impulsive. I told myself his intensity was just ambition with a sharp edge. So when things started breaking, my first instinct was still loyalty. Find the bug, protect the company, keep the story clean. And this wasn't a minor wobble. When our billing API stalled, customers couldn't generate invoices, payments failed midstream, and our support team started getting the kind of messages that include words like breach and lawyer. Every minute of downtime had a dollar value and a reputation value, and both were climbing. It started earlier with trust. Our platform handled invoicing and payments for mid-sized manufacturers. If we were down, their cash flow froze. If their cash flow froze, our phones exploded. At a little after 6 in the evening, my pager went off. The first signal was simple: a sudden jump in database CPU and lock weights. A minute later, the API error rate followed. The traffic wasn't higher than usual. No marketing blast, no partner spike, just the database choking. I kicked off the incident channel, assigned roles, and we went to work. Priya pulled logs. Vince checked replication. Support drafted a customer notice. I opened the slow query report and saw the same query repeating over and over, hammering the same tables like a fist on a locked door. It wasn't a new feature path. It was a reporting query, one we'd flagged months ago as dangerous in production. Back then, I'd raised it in leadership. "This needs caching or a separate replica," I'd said. "If someone hits it too often, it will starve transactions." Everyone agreed, except the CEO. He liked numbers on a screen. He wanted a real-time executive dashboard outside his office. Revenue, churn, payment failures, minutes to cash. He wanted it to refresh constantly because to him, any delay looked like weakness. I'd push back. "Constant full refresh against production is risky," I'd explained. "We can do near real-time summaries." He'd smiled like he was done listening. "If the product can't handle our own dashboard," he'd said, "what are we selling?" So I engineered around ego. I set up a read replica, tuned caching, and put hard limits in place. The dashboard could update often without crushing billing. I documented it and added alerts if refresh frequency spiked. One rule went into the runbook: executive dashboard queries must use the replica. For months, it worked. Quiet, boring. Until that evening when the database started dying with the exact symptom we'd designed against. I pulled connection logs. I didn't see a flood from customers. I saw a concentrated stream from one internal service account, Executive Dashboard Reader. That account was supposed to point at the replica, but the connections were landing on the primary database. Priya messaged, "The slow query is running every few seconds, sometimes overlapping." Vince added, "Locks are stacking, transactions are timing out. Primary is drowning." I asked the question I didn't want to ask. Who changed the executive dashboard configuration? No one answered, not because they were hiding it, because no one knew. We checked deployments. Clean. Infrastructure changes. Clean. Feature flags. clean, which meant the change happened outside our normal process. My phone buzzed again. The CEO's assistant. He's coming down. He wants updates. I glanced at the calendar invite I'd seen earlier. Board touchpoint, revenue dashboard, walkthrough. And the thought formed, simple and ugly. If he was showing the dashboard and it wasn't using the replica anymore, he wasn't just watching the failure, he was feeding it. The door opened hard. The CEO stormed in, eyes sweeping the screens, and he shouted, "Fix it tonight!" like he was yelling at a printer. I stood up and kept my voice even. "We've identified the source of load. We need to isolate it." He stepped closer. "Isolate what? The customers?" he snapped. "No," I said. "An internal dashboard." He blinked, annoyed. "My dashboard?" I didn't answer fast enough. "That dashboard is non-negotiable," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "The board is watching. Do your job." I nodded because arguing during a live incident is how you lose a team. But as he turned away, still barking orders, I opened a new window and began pulling the one thing that never lies. The audit trail. Because if I was right, the fix wasn't just technical, it was political. The first rule of an incident is this: you solve the problem in front of you, not the problem you wish you had. So I didn't argue with him. I didn't say, "You're the one hurting us." I didn't say, "Your vanity monitor's chewing through our billing engine." I kept my mouth shut and focused on keeping customers from bleeding out. But that was just the beginning. I muted the incident room microphone and told Priya, "Route the executive dashboard back to the replica. Now." She hesitated. "Change control?" "Emergency mitigation," I said. "I'll own it." Vince was already shaking his head. If the replica lags, he'll see stale numbers and lose his mind. "He's losing his mind anyway," I said. We moved fast. Priya opened the config in our service manager. The dashboard had two connection strings, one for the replica, one for fallback. That fallback was meant for testing and had a hard rate limit. The primary database should never have been in the path at all. But it was. Priya read the value out loud like it might change by confession. "Fallback points to primary." Vince leaned in. "That's not our template." "No," I said. "That's someone improvising." We flipped it back, redeployed, and watched the graphs like gamblers watching a wheel. The database CPU dipped. Lock weights fell. Customer errors slowed from a scream to a wheeze. Support posted an update. Intermittent issues. Mitigation in progress. The tickets didn't stop, but the tone shifted from panic to anger. Anger is survivable. Panic is not. The CEO paced behind us, too close, making the room smaller with every step. "Why is this taking so long?" he demanded. "Because we're fixing the actual source," I said, still careful. The dashboard was overloading production. He scoffed. "My dashboard doesn't touch production." "It does," Vince said before he could stop himself. "It was pointed at the primary." The CEO turned, slow, like he'd been insulted. "So you misconfigured it." I felt heat rise under my collar. Misconfigured. As if we'd accidentally aimed a cannon at our own feet. "We didn't deploy any change to it," I said. "We're investigating who altered the config." "Investigate later," he snapped. "Fix now." "We are fixing now," I said and kept my voice flat. "But we need to keep it fixed. If the dashboard keeps hammering the primary, we'll flap all night." He stared at me, and I saw the choice forming behind his eyes. Not logic, narrative. He needed someone to be wrong, and it couldn't be him. "Do you know what the board thinks when I show them a dashboard that lags?" he said. "They think we're lying." "They'll think we're lying if we're down," I replied. He waved his hand like he was swatting a fly. "Make it real time." "We can make it near real time," I said. "Real time is what's breaking billing." He leaned closer. "I didn't hire you for near." That night, I stopped being the hero. Because in that moment, I understood the truth. He wanted a story for the board more than he wanted a stable product for customers. Priya whispered, "Database is recovering. Queue depth is falling." A small relief hit my chest. Not joy, just the first breath after being held underwater. Then the CEO's phone buzzed. He glanced down and his expression sharpened. "They're asking for an update," he said, meaning the board, as if the board were a weather system. He walked out, leaving the door half open, and the room exhaled. 5 minutes later, a message hit the incident channel from his account. "Stop hiding behind process. I want a customer-facing fix, not a lecture." I stared at that line, then at the graphs, then at my team. I'd seen this pattern before. When executives get scared, they don't look for root cause. They look for a head to put on a slide. Vince leaned toward me. "He's going to go right back to that dashboard." "I know," I said. We pulled access logs. The executive dashboard service was quiet now. But the CEO didn't only use the dashboard through our service account. He had a direct link to the underlying report in our analytics tool, the one that could bypass our caching if you hit force refresh. He loved force refresh. It felt like control. I pinged security. "Need confirmation on executive analytics access. Seeing risky query behavior." Security replied with the corporate version of a shrug. "We'll check." Priya asked, "Should we rate limit at the database?" "It will break the report," Vince said. "It's already breaking the company," I replied. So we did the unthinkable. We protected production from leadership. Vince added a temporary governor. If that specific reporting query fired too often, it would be killed. Not forever. Just long enough to keep billing alive. We watched the graphs settle into something almost normal. Customer errors fell into the noise. Transactions started clearing. Support's tone softened. For the first time in over an hour, I believed we might make it through the night. And then from the hallway, I heard the CEO's voice rise. Sharp, impatient, like someone discovering a locked door. A second later, the database alarms began climbing again. The reporting query wasn't coming from our service account anymore. It was coming from one session. Executive tablet. And the refresh attempts were hitting over and over, as if he decided that if he couldn't see the numbers, he would hammer the system until it obeyed. I didn't know it yet, but that insistence on real time was about to expose exactly who had rewired the dashboard and why. The alarms didn't spike all at once. They crept up like a tide, the kind that kills you because you don't notice until you're already in deep water. Vince swore under his breath. "He's doing it again." On the screen, the expensive reporting query lit up, got killed by our governor, then reappeared. A forced refresh loop. Each time the database cut it off, another attempt followed seconds later, like someone pushing an elevator button harder because it isn't arriving fast enough. Support started posting new tickets. It came back. Payment failed again. Our customers are screaming. I stood up and walked into the hallway. The CEO was by the conference room, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and urgent, trying to sound calm while setting everything on fire. "I'm looking at it right now," he said. "The numbers are wrong. I told them to fix it." "Yes, tonight." He saw me and covered the mic. "Why is the dashboard frozen?" he hissed. "It isn't frozen," I said. "We're protecting production. Your forced refresh is triggering the heavy query." He stared at me like I'd accused him of sabotage. "I'm checking revenue," he snapped. "That cannot break the product." "It can," I said, "because the report is pointed at production again, and you're bypassing caching." He pulled his phone away, looked at the screen, then back at me. "So change it." "We did," I said, and then it changed back. "We need to know who modified it." His jaw flexed. "Are you telling me you can't control your own systems?" The phrasing was deliberate. Control. Systems. It wasn't a question. It was a setup. "I'm telling you someone is bypassing controls," I said. "If we ignore that, we'll be right back here tomorrow." He dropped his hand from the mic and spoke into the call again. "They're working on it," he said, as if I was a technician under his desk. Then he leaned close and lowered his voice. "If this is still unstable in an hour, I'm pulling in the CTO, and someone is going to answer for it." He turned and walked back into the conference room, leaving me in the hallway with the clearest view I'd had all night. He didn't want reliability. He wanted obedience. And then silence. the kind that means something's gone wrong. Because the moment he disappeared, the refresh attempts stopped. Not because he calmed down, because someone else had taken over. Back in the incident room, Priya's eyes were wide. "Query source changed," she said. "It's not the executive tablet now." Vince leaned in. "It's the emergency console." My stomach sank. We had a web UI for our secret store, an executive-approved break glass portal. It was supposed to be used in disasters when code deployments were impossible. It was also the kind of thing you build when someone powerful refuses to wait for review. I opened the access logs and searched for the break glass session. There it was, a privileged login from the CEO's account. And inside it, a config edit to the executive dashboard connection settings. Someone had flipped the dashboard back to production. Again. Not through code, not through review, through a backdoor. I realized I'd been saving people who never wanted saving. I called security again, this time without hedging. "I need a live lock on dashboard config changes," I typed. "We have active break glass edits impacting production." They replied almost immediately. "We see it. Pulling full audit trail now. Preserve evidence." Evidence. That word calmed me more than any green graph, because evidence means the story can't be rewritten. While Priya and Vince stabilized billing with throttles and routing, I went hunting for the origin, not the symptom, the root. I opened the analytics tool's audit logs, the ones nobody reads until someone's job is on the line. The executive report had a change history. Who edited it, when and what they touched. It also tracked data source configuration, replica, primary, credentials, fallbacks. At first glance, it looked normal. Then I saw a data source I'd never created. Primary direct, created 2 days earlier. My eyes narrowed as I clicked the creator name. Martin Contractor. I didn't recognize him. That was problem number 1. Problem number 2 was worse. The data source wasn't just created. It had been set as the fallback, and the dashboard's primary data source had been switched away from the replica. Reason entered in the comment field. Reduce lag for board demo. My throat went dry. 2 days earlier, board demo. I switched to our identity provider logs and searched for Martin Contractor. He wasn't an employee. His account was tied to a personal email, invited as an external user. But he had access to our executive reporting group, the group that could edit the dashboard and create data sources, granted by the CEO. I stared at the screen long enough that Vince noticed. "What did you find?" he asked. I turned the laptop toward him. His face changed in a way I'd only seen during major outages. First disbelief, then comprehension, then a quiet kind of anger. "So, he hired someone to speed it up," Vince said, voice flat, and they pointed it at production. "And then he's been flipping it back every time we correct it," Priya whispered. I didn't answer. I was doing the math of motives now. The CEO wanted 0 lag for the board. He didn't want to hear no. He didn't want to accept that real time comes with cost. So he created a shortcut, handed the keys to an outsider, and then acted surprised when the engine blew. And now, because he couldn't admit it, he was setting up the same story he'd always set up in crises. Engineering failed, not leadership. I saved screenshots, I exported logs, I timestamped everything, because I knew what was coming next. When the product finally stabilized, the technical incident would end, and the human incident would begin. They thought I was gone, that I'd quietly take the blame like I always did. I wasn't. By morning, the product looked steady again. Internally, the company didn't. At 3 a.m, while we were still clearing the backlog, the CEO sent an email to the exec list with the kind of subject line that makes your stomach drop. Incident summary. Immediate actions. In the body, he wrote that an internal reporting workload had exposed capacity gaps, and that engineering will tighten controls. No mention of the break glass portal. No mention of the contract. No mention of who approved anything. Just a clean little narrative where the outage happened to him, not because of him. I read it twice, then looked at my team. Priya's eyes were bloodshot. Vince had that dead, exhausted stare people get when they've been awake too long and still feel unsafe. And I understood exactly what the CEO was doing. He was laying a paper trail, and then silence, the kind that means something's gone wrong, because my phone lit up with a calendar invite titled Executive Debrief Required. Attendees: CEO, CTO, CFO, Head of Security, Legal, and me. Legal. That wasn't normal for a performance outage. That was containment. I didn't respond with anger. I didn't fire off a reply all. I did the only thing that survives politics. I packaged evidence like it was going to court. I pulled the analytics audit log showing the dashboard data source change. I pulled the identity provider log showing the external invite, the group assignment, and the break glass session. I pulled the secret store change record showing the connection string flipping back to the primary database. I captured timestamps. I exported them into a single incident appendix and wrote one sentence at the top. Root cause is an unreviewed configuration change that rerouted executive reporting to production and was repeatedly re-enabled via break glass access during the incident. Then I sent it to the CTO, the CFO, and security. No commentary, no emotion, just receipts. That morning, I walked into the debrief with a coffee I didn't taste and a calm I didn't feel. The CEO was already there, standing, performing, concerned. The CTO, Elena, sat at the end of the table, quiet and unreadable. The CFO, Daniel, had a legal pad out, which meant he was already angry. The CEO started immediately. "Last night was unacceptable," he said. "We had instability during a critical board touchpoint. We need accountability. Why did a basic internal dashboard bring us down?" He said basic like it was a toy that somehow exploded in a child's hands. Security cut in before he could build momentum. "We reviewed logs overnight," she said. "There's a clear configuration change tied to the executive dashboard that routed queries to the primary database." The CEO nodded fast like that proved his point. "Exactly. We need better engineering discipline." Elena's voice was flat when she spoke. "Discipline wasn't the issue," she said. "Process was bypassed." The CEO's eyes narrowed. "Bypassed by who?" Security slid a printed page across the table. "Break glass access was used," she said, "and an external account was granted privileged analytics permissions 2 days ago." Daniel looked up. "External account?" The CEO waved one hand. "We needed reporting help for the board. It's not a big deal." "It is a big deal," Legal said calmly, which somehow made it worse. "You granted external access to revenue reporting without a review." The CEO tried to smile. "It was temporary." Daniel's pen stopped moving. "Temporary doesn't matter if it touched production." The CEO turned slightly toward me, like a spotlight shifting. "So," he said, "why did engineering allow production to be used for that report?" I didn't argue. I didn't rant. I just opened my laptop and turned the screen toward the table. On the display, the audit trail, created by Martin Contractor. Change: dashboard data source switched from replica to primary direct. Comment: reduce lag for board demo. Access granted by CEO. The room went very quiet. I felt something in my chest loosen, not happiness, not victory. More like pressure releasing from a sealed container. That night, I stopped being the hero, and in this room, I stopped being the shield. Daniel leaned back slowly. "You invited an outsider, gave him executive analytics permissions, and he repointed reporting to production." The CEO's jaw tightened. "The replica was lagging," he said. "I made a business decision." Elena didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You made a production decision," she said. "Without engineering review, that's not business. That's operational risk." Security added, and during the incident, break glass access re-enabled the unsafe configuration multiple times. The CEO snapped, because the dashboard froze. It froze because we protected billing, Vince said, and I could hear him shaking with contained rage. You kept forcing refreshes from the executive tablet, then flipped the config back when we corrected it. The CEO stared at Vince like he couldn't believe a subordinate would speak in complete sentences. Legal looked at security. Do we have preservation of logs? Yes, security said. We locked the audit trail. The CEO's face changed then, not anger. Calculation. He realized the story couldn't be rewritten. Elena turned to me. What corrective actions do you recommend? I kept it simple because chaos demands clarity. Executive reporting must come from the warehouse, not production. Break glass should be restricted to the incident commander role. Analytics permission changes must require security approval. And external accounts must go through vendor onboarding. Daniel nodded. Effective immediately, he said, and wrote it down like a verdict. The CEO stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. So your solution is to lock me out of my own company. Elena met his eyes. My solution is to keep the company running, she said. You can have fast numbers. You just can't get them by breaking the engine. For a second, nobody spoke. Then the CEO picked up his coffee, didn't drink it, and walked out. The door shut, and the room exhaled like it had been holding its breath for months. Priya texted me under the table. Is this real? I typed back. It's in writing now. That was the micro-catharsis. Not the CEO storming out, not the tension, not the drama. The fact that the truth had a timestamp and the company's future now had guardrails he couldn't simply shout through. But I wasn't naive. Publicly confronting a CEO doesn't end a story. It starts the retaliation phase. As the meeting broke, legal stopped me at the door. One more thing, she said, polite and precise. We need a formal postmortem for the board. Full timeline. Full access history. No editorializing. I nodded. You'll have it. She held my gaze a moment. And, she added, there may be follow-up questions about why the break glass portal existed in its current form. I understood what she was really saying. The board wasn't just going to ask what happened. They were going to ask who insisted on the gun being loaded. I walked back to my desk, opened a new document, and started writing the timeline like my job depended on it. Because it probably did. And somewhere upstairs, the CEO was realizing that his favorite weapon, urgency, didn't work against logs. Not anymore. For the rest of that week, everything looked normal on the surface. The products stayed up. The dashboards refreshed. Customers stopped yelling. But inside the building, you could feel the air change, like the company had finally admitted that the biggest outages don't always come from code. Sometimes they come from entitlement. The morning after the debrief, security revoked Martin contractors' access and preserved every artifact, audit logs, change history, group assignments, break glass sessions. Procurement suddenly wanted to know who approved his invoice. Legal wanted a list of every report he had touched and every credential he had seen. The CEO didn't say my name in public for a while. He didn't have to. He started doing the executive version of punishment, pulling people into side conversations, hinting that certain teams were blocking velocity, asking if we were still the right fit for the next phase. In other words, he couldn't deny the evidence, so he tried to make the truth inconvenient. I didn't react. I didn't clap back. I did what engineers do when leadership gets emotional. I made the system more difficult to abuse. First, we moved executive reporting off production for good. Not mostly, not when convenient, fully. We already had a warehouse pipeline, but it wasn't complete enough for the CEO's favorite metrics, which meant he kept using the old report as a crutch. That crutch had nearly killed us. So I took 2 engineers, got formal approval from the CTO, and we rebuilt the executive dashboard properly. We streamed transaction events into the warehouse, built roll-ups, and served the executive views from that environment. We set refresh to a few minutes, which was more than fast enough for decision-making and far safer for billing. I also added something leadership hates, a visible indicator. At the top of the dashboard, in plain text, it said, data freshness, within a few minutes. Source, warehouse, not production. No drama, no blame, just reality. Second, we changed access. Break glass remained because companies love their safety myths, but it changed shape. It became a rotation role tied to incident command. It required a ticket number. It triggered an automatic alert to security and the CTO, and it was time-bound. When it expired, access shut off automatically. No more silent overrides. No more midnight, I'll just fix this quickly. Third, we changed analytics permissions. Any edit to executive reports now required security review. Any external account required vendor onboarding. Scope, access window, data classification, revocation plan. If someone wanted help for a board demo, they could have it, but it would be documented, reviewed, and traceable. The CEO hated all of this, but he couldn't openly fight it anymore because the board had asked for the formal post-mortem. And that's where karma really arrived. Not as revenge, not as a public firing, but as a quiet transfer of power. The post-mortem went to the board with a clean timeline. The incident wasn't framed as engineering instability. It was framed as executive reporting was repointed to production without review. An external account was granted privileged analytics access without security approval. Break glass access was used during an active incident to re-enable unsafe configuration. The result was production saturation, billing degradation, and customer impact. No editorializing, no insults, just a sequence of facts with timestamps. One board member asked a question that sounded harmless and felt deadly. Why did we allow break glass access to modify production reporting configurations at all? The CEO tried to answer. You could hear him searching for words that didn't admit the truth. Because the truth was simple. The portal existed the way it did because he demanded it. And the board now understood that fast and uncontrolled were not the same thing. A few days later, the CFO pulled me aside near the elevators. I'm not going to ask you how you feel about last night, he said. I'm going to ask you what you need. I kept my answer practical. Authority to enforce production controls, I said, in writing. He nodded once. Done. That afternoon, the CTO called me into her office and handed me a one-page document. It was short, boring, coldly beautiful. It stated that production configuration affecting customer-facing systems could not be altered outside the approved change process, except by the incident commander, during a declared incident, and that any exception required CTO and security approval. It also named me as the reliability lead, responsible for incident governance and production guardrails. I read it twice, then looked up. Elena's expression didn't change. You earned it, she said, and the company needs it. That was the micro-catharsis I didn't know I needed. Not praise, not applause, protection. The CEO tried one last move. In an all-hands, he said we were tightening process to improve resilience, and that some teams had gotten too comfortable saying no. He didn't look at me, but everyone knew who he meant. After the meeting, 2 directors came to my desk, not to complain, to quietly ask how to request changes the right way. Now, that's when I realized the shift had already happened. He could still shout, he could still storm into rooms, but the company no longer moved just because he was loud. A month later, the board approved hiring a chief operating officer, someone whose entire job was to professionalize execution and control operational risk. It was announced as supporting growth. Inside the building, everyone translated it the same way. The board wanted a grown-up in the room. The CEO didn't get fired. Karma isn't always cinematic. It was worse for him than that. He got limited. He lost his shortcuts. He lost his backdoors. He lost the ability to turn urgent into override. He had to submit requests like everyone else, wait for reviews, and hear the word no from people who now had written authority to say it. One evening, weeks after the incident, I stayed late to finish a stability review. On my way out, I paused near the screen outside his office. The executive dashboard he'd nearly burned the company down for. It glowed calmly. Revenue, churn, payment health. It refreshed steadily without spikes, without panic. Not real time, real enough, and safe. I stood there for a moment, listening to the hum of a company that wasn't collapsing, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time at work. Peace. Because the final satisfaction wasn't watching the CEO get humiliated. It was knowing the system now had guardrails that even he couldn't shout through. The next time he stormed in and yelled, "Fix it tonight," everyone would already know what to check first. Not the code, the person yelling.